All right, good afternoon. Today I want to take 20 minutes to discuss a group of people we often consider to be the reason our jobs can be so difficult. That, of course, would be the end user. But today, I'm actually here to defend them. With the rapidly changing face of technology, it must be very difficult to be an end user. What with new operating systems and hardware advances and technologies like the cloud or virtualization, and then the ever-evolving regulatory standards, I can't imagine how the average user who isn't an IT specialist can even manage to keep up. To make things worse, I believe that we, the information technology experts and leaders, do things that are counterproductive and even create bad habits in our end users. So why should you take my word for this? Well, if you don't already know me, my name is Pierini. I'm Director of Technical Services for PSC. Now, I've been in IT for over 20 years and spent the last 15 of those years in security. And I started my career back in the days of DOS, before the internet, back when the screech of your modem serenaded your connection to America Online. Today, I'm a QSA, a PAQSA, PFI, and an ASV. I run the security lab for PSC, and I've traveled the world hacking into networks for our customers, seeking compliance with the payment card industry data security standard. So I was the co-sponsor of the special interest group on penetration testing, and I wrote big sections of the guidance that came out in June of 2015. I run a team of some of the most talented hackers you're ever likely to run across. Now, I've been around the block a few times, and my team and I have seen a few things over the years, so I think I'm qualified to discuss this. So, as I said, my team and I perform hundreds of pen tests a year, and we get a lot of interesting feedback. Some of it's useful, some of it you can't repeat in polite company, but the majority of it is this: why do you guys have to make my job so much harder? Okay, you know what? Fair statement. Strong security does end up making things a little less convenient, maybe a little bit harder to get things done. Oh sure, there are some technologies like biometrics, where you could argue that it makes things more efficient, but on the whole, we have to agree that security does add a level of complexity. And it's not just our end users that are complaining, it's our sysadmins too. They point out that all these security controls, all the new technologies, and the meetings, the endless meetings with the auditors, make it harder to manage and maintain their systems, and there's already too much to do and too little time to get it done. And so it goes. We have this constant battle between strong security and convenience. And this, I say, is where the corners get cut, where shortcuts get made, and we begin to create situations that actually teach our end users bad habits. So, I got an idea. Let's describe a scenario that might help illustrate what I'm talking about. So follow along with me. This is Bob. Bob is a lead architect for a food and beverage technology company in California. Bob is the designer of the world's most popular point-of-sale system. Bob, as a result, is sort of a big deal in his company. Bob is a mover and a shaker, a real up-and-comer. Well, Bob considers himself to be a power user and internet savvy. IT considers him to be a pain in the butt and kind of high maintenance. But what they both agree is that Bob needs to be a nimble mobile road warrior. So they've outfitted him with the latest and greatest in Windows mobile technologies and given him a VPN with multi-factor authentication so that he can still get to the files he needs when he's on the road. Now, not to give it away, some of the decisions made and some of the corners that have been cut are going to put Bob at a real disadvantage. So this is where it all goes down. Bob is traveling to Tallahassee, Florida, to meet a client to close the deal on an upgraded payment system. And after receiving his bottle of water and free high-speed internet for his continued loyalty as a gold member, Bob gets in his room, orders up some room service, and connects to the Wi-Fi. Now, in our fictional scenario, Bob just got a brand new laptop, so he's still tweaking it to suit himself. So the first thing Bob is kill that new endpoint protection that IT department installed. It slows down his system and it makes it hard for him to share files right from his desktop. Then Bob checks his email, skipping past an annoying pop-up that he gets every time he connects to his company's intranet. Then Bob replies to a few emails, reads the email from Human Resources about the mandatory annual security training that he has to take next week. And then he downloads the proposal for tomorrow, and he gets ready. Then he checks the news and reads that Dropbox is forcing changes for any user who hasn't changed their password since 2012. Now this one I'm not making up. This isn't fictional. You may have already heard about it. Apparently it's an old hack, but there's something like 60 million credentials that have been lost. So out of an abundance of caution, Bob thinks, maybe it would be best if I changed all of my important passwords. So everything from his online investments and accounting and banking to his fantasy games will need to be changed. Bob thinks long and hard for a password that he's told needs to be hard to guess but easy to remember. Now, some of these password rules are kind of complicated. So Bob thinks to himself, well, my old password was elflord 2012, and elflord 2016 meets all these requirements, and it's the same as his domain admin or his domain password, so it'll be easy to remember. Genius. So after about an hour of typing elflord 2016 over and over online, Bob kicks back, cracks open his complimentary water, and relaxes with a few cat videos on YouTube. No, who doesn't like a good cat video? So there you have it. Our stage is set. Now, how will this pan out for Bob? Any ideas? Well, let's see. Yeah, that's it. Bob's pwned. His machine has been compromised, and he's now the proud owner of a sophisticated, advanced, persistent threat that just can't wait until he gets back to the office. So what happened? What went wrong? More importantly, really, what part of this is Bob's fault? And what part of his compromise can be traced back to some bad habits we've created through sloppy administration and some shortcuts? Well, the moment Bob connected to the wireless, he became a real target. Bob's web traffic was being intercepted by a malicious hacker. Now, there are several easy ways to do this, but in this scenario, Bob was hit by what's called an evil twin attack. In this attack, Bob was connected to what he thought was the hotel wireless network, but instead he was connected to the hacker's malicious network. Then in a matter of minutes, the hacker captured his weak password, cracked it, logged into his machine, and loaded up some malware. And it's easy enough to do. Seriously, there are tools on the internet that you could automate and do yourself. But this dirty network isn't entirely to blame for Bob's cyber demise. He made a few bad decisions, but he was set up by his IT department, who created a few critical bad habits in Bob. So this is bad habit number 1, cutting corners on certificates. Now, Bob was on the hacker's network now, and that made it possible for the hacker to intercept all the requests using a classic man-in-the-middle attack. Now, the only warning that Bob got that something funny was going on was that pop-up that he's already so used to seeing in the office. Now, PCI requirement 4.1 says to use only trusted keys and certificates, and your organization is probably doing that in the CVE. But self-signed and expired certificates are a common fixture in most internal corporate networks. And while they still serve the purpose of encrypting traffic, the pop-ups that result from the browsers begin to desensitize our end users. Over time, they see them more as a pain in the butt rather than an early warning flag of impending doom. With a hacker controlling the network, sniffing traffic is pretty easy. When the attacker replaces a valid certificate with the one that they've created, it gives them the ability to peer into what should be protected and encrypted traffic, right? It will create those untrusted browser certificate pop-ups, but our users are so numb to these that they don't know what they mean anymore. We've taken away any sense of urgency or warning. So bad habit number 2, setting arbitrary limits on how our users can create passwords. Now, back a few slides ago, did you notice the rules that Bob was saddled with when he had to create a new password? If we want users to create strong, difficult to guess, impossible to crack passwords, then we need to stop writing applications that prevent users from doing just that. I know that requirement 8.2.3 says that password passphrases must meet the following: a minimum of 7 characters containing both numbers and letters. But I promise you, that's not strong enough. I encourage you to go above and beyond. There are simple tools that can brute force a password for an operating system. You can do it for a remote desktop protocol, or even a Microsoft SQL Server. And you only need one of those passwords to take over the entire machine. Now, are you familiar with OAuth's Passfault? If you haven't seen this, this is a fantastic online tool for articulating password risk. Now, I took Bob's new ElfLord 2016 password and dropped it into this. Now, it met all of the complexity requirements and would have been just as practical in his corporate network, and yet this can be cracked in less than a day. With GPUs and a hashcat cracking rig, you can probably get this down to a matter of minutes. Now, bad habit number 3, security is a once-a-year exercise. Now, the human resource email to Bob to take his annual security awareness training reinforces the thinking that security is just a once-a-year event, right? It really should be more than an annual CBT and some cute posters in the break room. Requirement 12.6.1 says to educate personnel upon hire, and then at least annually. But we operate in a world where the threats are changing constantly. Give you an example. For this year, ransomware, as you've heard, experienced a 5-fold increase in organizations across the globe. So was ransomware included in last year's security awareness training? No? Are you willing to wait 4 months until 2017 to bring it up? Really, we need to be doing it constantly and re-educating our users. Bad habit number 4 is letting convenience trump security. I get this. I used to be a sysadmin, and when resources are stretched thin, it's tempting to give the users more permissions than they really need. It might reduce the number of help desk ticket requests, but it will increase the likelihood of compromise. And one of the most commonly exploited shortcuts is giving users local admin privileges. It seems like the right thing to do, but it can lead to unintended consequences. In our fictional scenario, in fact, it's the reason that Bob was hacked so quickly. Local admin rights can lead to disabled firewalls, and now you've got nothing to keep the hackers out. Suspended antivirus and malware protection, so now you've got nothing to prevent even the stupidest of attacks. And then they can put on any software they want, stuff that you don't know about, you won't patch and you won't secure. And ultimately, these bad habits that we're teaching our end users can lead to the bad guys getting that initial foothold into your network. Because the Bobs in your network, they're a stepping stone. Now, when we perform pen tests, yeah, we look at your CDE and we do some preliminary scans and take a peek at it, but we really don't focus on it. If you've done your job even half as good as you should, we know that going up against your CDE is probably going to be pretty difficult. But we do know that you've got privileged users who have to get into the cardholder data environment to manage, monitor, and maintain the CDE. So we're going to go after them. Once we get them, that initial entry point, we can pivot through their machines, we can impersonate their identities, we can take their privileges and do whatever we want. In fact, could there be hackers in your network right now? A recent study said that for financial institutions, it takes about 98 days on average before anybody detects an intruder. And if you're in retail, up to 197 days. So I think we'd all agree that it's probably easier to prevent the hacker than to detect them. And I argue that if we focus on security rather than on this letter of compliance, we have a better chance of stopping the hacker before they can compromise the Bobs in our network. All right, so now what? How do we eliminate these bad habits that, let's admit, we've created and guide our users into making better decisions? All right, let's start with user education. Let's engage the user on a more personal level by making them look at security awareness in the ways that it affects them. Remind them that it's important for all aspects of their online life, not just in the workplace. And you've got to rinse and repeat with this one. You've got to do it constantly. Employees need to be regularly reminded about the organization's security policies and procedures, and they should be tested on a regular and frequent basis to ensure that their knowledge is up to date. Reward for good behavior. I think this works better than anything else. Publicly recognizing success is key to making employees feel valued and engaged in the process. You can do it via the internet, newsletters, internal marketing, even just an email from the CEO saying, good job, pat on the back, will go very far. Conduct periodic penetration testing, especially phishing and social engineering. And I know the standard right now doesn't require it, but this is where the majority of the attacks are occurring, from the outside, through ransomware, through malware. And then measure your success periodically to see how this is affecting, or whether or not you're raising awareness and reducing the number of infections. Now let's make security warnings important again. Use valid certificates on everything. It used to be that they were expensive, but now you can get a certificate from SSLmate for 16 bucks, and you can go to Let's Encrypt and get certificates for free. So now it's no longer an excuse. Once your environment is ready, re-educate your users on what the pop-ups mean, and then give them a mechanism for reporting it if they start to see them again. And then test your users, see how they will react. I gotta tell you, with this pop-up thing, it's not gonna be an overnight success. You're gonna have to work on this one and go through several iterations for you to work out this habit. It's deeply ingrained, and it's a big problem. You probably see it on the plane. When you're connected to the United Wi-Fi, you'll start to get those pop-ups. It's everywhere, so we've gotta begin to raise the awareness and make our end users understand what the impact could be. And don't set arbitrary limits on your applications. Allow users to create long passphrases instead of short, hard-to-remember passwords, and give them the ability to use special characters. Now, some systems like Microsoft Windows domain controllers can't enforce genuinely complicated passwords. For them, it's just numbers and letters and special characters. It's a relatively simple task, however, to dump out all the hashes out of your domain controller and then audit them rather quickly. If you don't know how to do this, come down to the booth in the vendor area and talk to me. I can go ahead and set you up with everything you need. And frankly, I'm a huge fan of password vaults. Give your users a place to store the complicated passwords. We're asking them to have a unique password for everything and make it difficult, and then we don't give them anything to store it on. Of course they're gonna write it on Post-it notes, or they're gonna use Winter 2016 for all of their passwords. So my definition of a privileged user, as I said before, is anyone who manages or maintains the cardholder data systems or accesses applications that have access to PAN data. And these are the targets in your network. So identify your privileged users, understand who they are. Audit their permissions. I bet you'll be surprised to discover that there are 1 or 2 domain admins that you didn't know that you had. Review the process for granting additional privileges. Make sure you're just not handing it out to anybody who asks. And when possible, use multiple accounts. You've got your privileged account, you got your regular account, and don't share passwords. All right, now that takes care of the bad habits, but what else can we do? Let's make sure we're giving our users the tools to stay safe. Number 1, control the network at all times. Limit what wireless networks users can connect to. Can I get a show of hands about how many people have been using the PCI wireless network here? Oh, good. Come by the booth, and we'll talk about what your password is and what you should change it to. Again, you don't control this network. You don't know what's on it, who's on it, and what they're doing. Use MiFis for travel. And again, not just the admins. Any privileged user is a target. Enable personal firewalls and make sure that users can't shut them off. Some of the endpoint protection systems will actually even prevent domain admins from shutting it off. It's a completely separate credential. Then you can block everything inbound because realistically, there's no legitimate reason that any workstation should be accepting inbound SMB connections. When you do this, you make the machines disappear off the network, and we can't hack what we can't see. Now this slide, the council requested that I soften this slide a little bit. So I added sort of. Well, between you and me, AV sucks. It's not something that you should be betting your career on. Installing it as part of a layered defense, sure, it will catch some of the regular things, but understand that AV seldom works, even against a moderately skilled attacker. There are a bunch of techniques for obfuscating your payloads and bypassing antivirus. You can get it online. One of them is called Veil Framework, and there are several others. Combine it with a good program of logging and alerting, so at least if something does happen, you can immediately identify it and begin to act upon it. Frankly, application whitelisting is a better way to go. It's a bit complicated and it is hard to set up, and it will take you several iterations to get it right, but for cases like point of sale systems or kiosks, it doesn't get any better than application whitelisting. Then regularly test. Test and repeat. Create specific scenarios. Ask yourself different questions. For example, what would happen if one of your customers got hacked? Or if one of your vendors got hacked? How would this change your risk profile? And then validate the specific controls that you put in place. Don't rely on your vendors to say, oh yeah, this is the magic bullet, this works. And then test your compensating controls. If you're writing a compensating control for PCI, bring in the pen testers. Have them take a look at it. See if they can bypass it or they can do something else with it. Validate your assumptions so you don't get caught off guard. So when thoroughly approached and consistently applied, the PCI data security standard can make a huge impact on your overall security posture. But it's up to us to make sure that our end users have the tools and the knowledge they need to be successful and ensure that we're not setting them up for failure. Now, my name is Joseph Pierini. I'm with PSC, and you guys have been a great audience. Thank you.